The September sky pressed heavy over New York as Graham Ward, 38, stood by the glass wall of his penthouse, unsure how to reach his 8-year-old son, Leo, whose anger had just driven another nanny to flee in tears. But that same day, a new face appeared, Maya Torres, 26.
Hello.
She wasn't polished, she wasn't wealthy, but from the moment she stepped inside, something in Leo began to change. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. The first cool week of September slid over Manhattan. In his penthouse, Graham Ward, 38, a Wall Street tycoon who had climbed fast and hard in less than 2 decades, noticed only the sharper light on the glass. His 8-year-old son, Leo, noticed everything, and fought it. That morning another sitter quit after a cereal bowl became a comet, splashing milk across a priceless portrait. He needs structure, HR advised. He needs you, the housekeeper murmured. The applicant waiting in the kitchen didn't fit any resume. Maya Torres, 26, who had been piecing together odd jobs since high school, stood in thrift store sneakers, meeting Graham's wary eyes. I don't have much experience, she admitted. But I have patience. And a subway card. That's not a qualification, Graham said dryly. It is for New York. She crouched to Leo's level, unbothered by his glare. I'm Maya. What do you hate most about grown-ups? They don't listen, he muttered, shooting a quick look at his father like a dare. Maya nodded. Then we'll start with quiet. Then she turned to Graham. What scares him? The question landed heavier than she knew. Graham, who could recite enterprise values to the decimal and volatility curves before coffee, realized he had never once asked his son what kept him awake at night. For the first time in years, he looked at Leo not as a problem to solve, but as a boy sitting small beneath all that glass and silence. Something in his chest shifted, just slightly, like the city tilting under his feet. Maya's curriculum was the city itself. They learned chess by watching old men in Central Park and losing loudly on purpose so the rules arrived like jokes. They rode the queue to Coney Island just to smell salt and burn $5 on rigged games, sharing a paper cone of fries. They traced murals in Bushwick with their fingertips, inventing stories for painted strangers who looked braver than they felt. Graham signed the forms, scheduled the drivers, pretended not to hover. When Leo returned flush-cheeked and sandy, saying, "Checkmate," with a crooked grin, jealousy pinched, a feeling he recognized from hostile takeovers, the ugly want to own what you didn't create. Maya turned tantrums into choices, timer for 5 minutes, or 10. She listened like time was elastic and Leo owned a piece of it. You're rewarding bad behavior, Graham said one night, trying to sound like a steady father and not a threatened boss. I'm honoring unmet needs, she answered, rinsing paint from small hands. He needs attention that isn't transactional. Graham bought a climbing wall. Leo touched it once and went back to the travel-size chessboard. In a glass office the next day, Graham heard his own voice promising a client real value, not surface optics, and winced at the mirror he'd just walked into. The city had become a teacher he couldn't tip. He tucked the travel board into his backpack like a secret map. That night Leo fell asleep with a pawn in his palm, fingers curved around it as if it could anchor dreams. Graham stood in the doorway cataloging expenses that could never purchase that peace, and for once he didn't reach for his phone. Ward Capital's compliance chief slid a folder across the desk. Unusual interest from tabloids in your household, Graham. Nanny angle. Also, small flag. A printout showed unpaid medical debt at a Queens hospital owned by a portfolio company. The debtor, Teresa Torres. Maya's mother, Graham said, masking the jolt. Motive glinted like a shard. He hated wondering if kindness carried an invoice, hated more that his world trained him to. He called a private investigator and immediately loathed himself. That night he found Maya teaching Leo how to breathe through fury, counting subway stops in their heads. Atlantic Avenue. Canal. Spring, Leo's jaw unclenched like a door on new hinges. Graham stood by the doorway, invisible, feeling both grateful and replaced. "You have a gift," he said, meant as neutral. "It's a skill anyone can learn," she replied. "You included." On the way out, Graham noticed a thin envelope peeking from Maya's tote. Inside, he glimpsed colored paper. Not bills, crayon drawings of smiling kids stamped, Little Lantern Daycare. The logo pried memory open. Ward Capital had acquired that chain last year and leaned it out. Many centers closed and staff scattered. He shut the door on the thought, but it kept knocking, bringing a draft of blame into rooms he kept climate-controlled. The PI's message buzzed again, a note that Teresa's debt wasn't delinquency but paperwork, a charity program closed during efficiency improvements. Graham felt the phrase scrape. He had signed the memo that buried that decision. Down the hall Leo shouted, "Your move," and Maya laughed, a sound like someone opening a window. Leo's worst hour was always bedtime. Maya sat on the carpet, building a fort from couch cushions while Graham hovered uselessly, an executive without a brief. "We can't coddle him forever," he said, hearing his late wife Nora's voice and then the silence that followed it 2 years ago on a wet November night, sirens, a hospital corridor, a doctor's mouth moving around words that didn't land. Maya clipped a lamp behind the fort, turning the room into warm cave. "We're not coddling. We're co-regulating." Leo crawled inside, face drawn. "Do you miss Mom when it rains?" she asked softly. Leo nodded once. Graham felt something in his chest loosen and ache, like a knot admitting it was a knot. They played chess with checkers, the rules invented, victories small and loud. Leo laughed for the first time that Graham could remember without a screen flickering nearby. Later, when Maya left, Graham stood alone in the doorway, listening to the city hum like a machine he owned but couldn't fix. He checked his phone. The investigator had texted, "Torres worked at Little Lantern. Laid off after your acquisition." Attached was a photo of Maya leading a circle of toddlers, eyes bright. The image made him proud and ashamed in equal measure. He stared until the screen dimmed and his reflection, tired, rich, lonely, stared back. He had told himself for 2 years that Leo would heal on a schedule if the calendar stayed full, tutors, Mandarin, fencing. Watching the fort glow, he knew how wrong he'd been. He sat on the floor outside the doorway and let the carpet press a pattern into his palms until the buzzing in his head quieted. He confronted her the next morning, rehearsed neutrality dissolving the second he spoke. "Are you here because of leverage over my portfolio companies? Your mother's debt? The daycare we closed?" Maya's posture went very still. "I'm here because your son is drowning in a very expensive house," she said. "And yes, I ran a room full of 3-year-olds that your spreadsheet erased. I took this job because I saw a boy I recognize, a kid whose grown-ups are always busy saving the world for other people." She pulled the envelope from her bag and placed the drawings on the counter. "I don't want your money. I want Leo to exhale. If that threatens your model, fire me. But don't pretend this is about integrity when it's about control." Anger rose like heat under Graham's collar. He reached for the old instruments, doubt, distance, dismissal. "You lied by omission." "I protected my boundaries," she said, eyes damp but defiant. "And I protected your son from my resentment by leaving it outside your door." She unpinned Leo's day schedule from the fridge and set it carefully aside, a small ceremony of departure. "If you think I'm a threat, I'll go now and spare him the fallout." Leo walked in with a knight from the travel set clutched in his hand. "Maya? Are we still going to the park?" he asked, voice small. She smiled at him, then at Graham. "You are," she said to Leo. "With your dad." The word landed like a challenge and a gift. The elevator chimed somewhere in the hall, and all three stared toward it as if an answer might step out. 2 hours alone with Leo in Central Park felt longer than any earnings call. Graham tried rules. Leo tried silence. They sat, Two planets sharing gravity but not warmth, pigeons stepping like tiny clerks around their shoes. Finally Graham admitted the truth, aloud and to himself. "I don't know how to do this," he said, and heard how small he sounded. "Then start where you are," said a voice behind him. Maya stood at a distance, having shadowed them only to ensure Leo didn't bolt. "You don't need me to fix it. You need me to show you how to stay." She taught Graham her slow magic: ask questions with no quiz at the end, narrate feelings without verdicts, let the clock breathe. They lost to a grandmaster in the park and celebrated the loss like a holiday. Graham apologized, in front of Leo, not behind closed doors. "I was wrong about Maya," he told his son. "Adults get scared and mess up, too." That night, thunderstorms rolled down the Hudson, flickering against skyscraper ribs. A text from the board chair arrived, press sniffing. CFO suggests proactive distancing from optics. Another from the housekeeper: the building's generator had been glitching. Maya dried plates, pretending not to see. Graham's jaw tighten. Outside, the wind changed and the city inhaled. On the walk home they let the city set the tempo, stopped for a drummer in the subway, high-fived the pretzel guy, listened to a preacher who talked about mercy like it could be measured out by hand. Graham bought nothing, except time. It felt like the first honest trade he'd made all year. Morning brought headlines that bit: Stairwell Cinderella, Wall Street widower and his nanny. Someone had sold photos of Maya holding Leo's hand during a meltdown, sanctimony packaged as scandal. At school, a classmate sneered, "Your nanny's your new mom." Leo shoved him and cried later, furious with himself and with the world that baited him. Graham found the leak source faster than he found the right words. CFO Adrian Pike had always been efficient. "Personal exposure harms enterprise value," Pike said coolly. "We need a clean break. Temporarily, of course." Graham said. He thought of the daycare photo, the moments his fund had turned to numbers and the air went thin. He went to the lobby and made a statement that advisors begged him not to make. "My family's boundaries aren't a PR strategy," he told reporters. "My son's caregiver is not a scandal. She is a professional. We will not participate in this circus." The stock dipped by lunch. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. The house intercom crackled with neighbors' worries about the generator. Graham closed his laptop and built a blanket fort with Leo on the living room rug because the building storm asked for caves, and because choices make men, not markets. Maya tucked a flashlight inside like a hearth. After pickup, a parent whispered that people like that change men for the worse. Maya kept walking. Graham heard the word people and thought about who counts, who doesn't, how fast a headline can turn a human being into a warning label. He chose, loudly, to stand next to her in the frame. At 7:11 p.m., the lights blinked, hesitated, and vanished. Sirens lilted somewhere deep. Phones glowed, then died. A citywide blackout crawled over Manhattan like fog. On the 47th floor, emergency generators hiccuped, then surrendered in a sigh. The apartment became a ship without stars, windows reflecting only their own faces. Leo's breath quickened. Maya crouched, her voice the soft metronome he knew. "Count stations," she whispered. "Atlantic Avenue. Canal." Spring. Graham lifted Leo onto his back. Together they opened the stairwell door. Heat rose like a physical thing. Neighbors spilled out with flashlights and casseroles of fear. "Fort every 3 flights, Maya said, setting rest goals. Graham laughed despite himself and obeyed. They paused on landings, telling one true thing about Nora each time: her obsession with making lists, the way she danced badly to good music, how she'd wanted Leo to learn patience and joy. The stairwell became a memory gallery and, for once, Graham spoke without hurrying the end. On floor 31, a woman sobbed about insulin in her fridge. Pike, the CFO, appeared from the shadows, panicked about a downtown server. "We need to get to the garage," he started. "We need to get this kid to cool air," Graham said, moving past. Choices, again, clean and hard. On 23, Leo spotted a glowstick bracelet and put it on like armor. Knight to e5, he whispered into Graham's ear, and Graham moved another step. Somewhere outside, a siren hooped and quit. Somewhere above, a baby wailed and then quieted. The city, blindfolded, kept feeling its way forward. They reached the lobby, a cathedral of quiet where doormen had become camp counselors. Candles pooled on the marble like small moons. Outside, the street was a block party of necessity, grills fired, strangers shared ice, somebody played Springsteen on a battery speaker and no one complained because the chorus sounded like stubborn hope. Leo clung to Graham's neck, then slid down and took his hand. "Dad?" he asked, a word used like a new shoe. In the dim, it fit. Graham felt his throat close, he lifted Leo and they cried without apology, grief and relief trading places. Maya coordinated neighbors with the calm of a general, elders to chairs, meds to coolers, kids to story circle. Graham moved generators from a shuttered construction site, bartered favors for flashlights, and discovered a competence not listed on his CV, being useful when nobody's keeping score. He told Leo about Nora under the fading sky, not the saint or the ghost, but the woman who burned pancakes and forgave quickly. Dawn found them on the stoop, sticky and proud. The board's meeting, moved to noon, would decide Graham's future at Ward Capital. He looked at Leo asleep against his chest, at Maya pouring coffee for a nurse who'd worked through the night, and decided to stop asking the city who he was. When a food truck owner handed out free empanadas, Graham insisted on paying and the man waved him off. "Pay it forward when the lights are back," he said. Graham promised, thinking of budgets that cut first where the poor bleed. He watched Leo share the last bite with a girl he'd just met. By noon, power limped back, the city clearing its throat. In the boardroom's flat light, Adrian Pike wore victory like a tie. "Your judgment is compromised," he declared. "Step aside." Graham considered the tally sheet he had always used on himself: assets, wins, worship. Then he pictured last night's stairwell forts and the word "Dad" spoken like a blessing, the street choir of strangers making a republic out of candles. "You're right," he said, and watched Pike's eyebrows leap. "I am compromised, by loving my kid more than my quarterly report. I'm restructuring the fund. We will not buy profit by breaking communities. Starting with Little Lantern. Reopen them." "You don't have the votes," Pike said. "Then I don't have the company," Graham replied. "But I have a life." He texted his general counsel, filed the resignation he'd written at dawn, and walked out into a September that smelled like hot metal and new pencils. On the sidewalk he found Maya and Leo waiting by a curbside chessboard, sunlight cutting their profiles clean. "I can't ask you to stay as an employee," he said to Maya. "I'm asking you to stay as part of our future." He didn't say family. He didn't need to. Maya looked at Leo. He nodded. "Checkmate," she said, smiling, and moved a pawn into a queen. He wasn't naive, he knew the exodus that would follow, the capital that would circle elsewhere, the dinners he wouldn't be invited to. But he also knew the apartment would feel warmer at 6 p.m., the way it had in the blackout with candles and crayons and stories that didn't need a soundtrack to matter. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.